the person you have to spend the most time listening to in your life is yourself. Try not to lose their respect. And self-respect and self-esteem, I think, largely comes from having faith in your own word. So if you were to treat yourself like a friend you are responsible for helping, which is Peterson's advice, right? Let's say that every time you invited a friend out for lunch, they turned up late or didn't turn up at all, they didn't text back, they just kept not holding to their word. After a while, you wouldn't believe in them, you wouldn't be friends with them, and you'd stop inviting them out to lunch. You are that friend to yourself. How on earth do you think that you're going to be able to move mountains and get out of that relationship that you don't like and move countries or change career when you can't not hit snooze, even though last night you promised yourself that you weren't going to hit snooze? And it's how people that are able to do extraordinary things have been able to get there, that they've just started off unbelievably small, right? I'm just not going to hit the snooze button. I'm just not going to use my phone before 9 a.m., right? Controlling your thoughts is unbelievably difficult and requires a lot of meditation and maybe psychedelics. Controlling your actions is relatively easy, especially stuff like don't pick your phone up before you've gone for a walk. Just try that in the morning. Sunlight before screen light, as Huberman says.
And that's the easiest way to control your thoughts.
Yeah.
Because there's a two-way relationship between what you do and how you feel.
Absolutely.
So if you want to change how you feel, focus on what you're doing. If you want to change what you're doing, focus on how you feel. But you said about extraordinary there, this is what Chris Eubank Jr. said to me, which really stuck with me. He said, my dad flew me to Cuba, and we had a training camp there, and they surprised me. They put the heavyweight champion of Cuba in the ring with me. He's like a middleweight or something. He gets in the ring, this heavyweight storms across to him, knocks him so hard, he flies out of the ring and hits the floor, dead leg, and he's laying on the floor. He said to me, up at the ring, and I saw this massive Cuban heavyweight stood there. And he said, I realized in that moment that I had to get back in the ring, because if I didn't, it would let the demons in. And another instance of when he talks about the demons more specifically was on his story about the treadmill. He goes, if I'm running on a treadmill and I get to mile 9 and I get complete cramp in one of my legs, and I know I've told myself I'm going to run 10 kilometers today, he goes, I will have to limp the last mile, even if no one's watching, because I can't let the demons in. And if I let the demons in, they'll show up in the 11th round of a championship fight when there's 50,000 people watching me in the audience. And I know deep in my self-story that I'm the type of person that quits when things get hard because I got off that treadmill at mile 9 when no one was watching. It would modify my self-story. The commitments we keep to ourselves and what we do when no one's watching is the most persuasive evidence that governs everything we then do every day thereafter. And this is, for me, was a huge revelation in my life, because, you know, you can look at certain people in your lives that are struggling in certain situations, and oftentimes it's a result of continually unkept commitments to themselves.
Consistency doesn't guarantee that you're going to be successful, but not being consistent will guarantee that you're not successful.
Let me un-Superman. Let's the mess of this is some people are remarkably good at keeping commitments in some areas of their lives and hopeless in others. So they'll have kind of dual self-esteem. They'll be incredibly, confident and secure in their work, but in relationships or whatever else, they'll be at ground zero.
There's a quote that I've fallen in love with. The magic you are looking for is in the work you're avoiding.
Yeah.
Fuck, dude. The magic you are looking for is in the work you're avoiding. And every single time that there is something in front of me that I feel like things aren't way sufficiently quickly, I'm not making the progress that I want, it's because I'm dicking about over here and there is a large frog in front of me that I need to eat. I need to spend another half day reading a book. I need to spend some more time researching online and upping my skills in this particular area. I need to do whatever it is.
Do you know what's interesting? Is the most intelligent people I've met, the most successful people I've met as entrepreneurs and practitioners never really read books. Like Elon Musk of the world. I know he watches movies and stuff. He gets his inspiration points from many areas. But thinking about the great CEOs that I've met and the great founders and the great artists I've met, there's almost I think I said this to you earlier on, that knowing too much can be a real disservice to innovation and creativity. Like knowing too much information, whereas this sort of practitioner pathway where you naively stumble through new territories seems to be more conducive with the real pioneers.
I wonder whether that's the curse of knowledge. In a way, you familiar with this? Yeah, Steven Pinker's idea of the curse of knowledge, that when you start to learn things, you can't understand that other people don't know it. And you also lose the learner's mind in some regard, which is you're not, like you said about, you come into this room and there's a million bits of information that you could be focusing on, but you're not focusing on those, you're focusing on the ones that matter. And I think that when you start to kid yourself that you know what you're talking about, you're no longer quite as open to these new ideas. I would say the difference for our industry, what we largely traffic in are anecdotes and insights, right? And they can come from experience, but I also like exposing myself to new ideas from other people. And the quickest way to do that, actually, this is a lie. The quickest way to do that would be to permanently be going for dinner with interesting people. But that's like an unsustainable life. It would be like 2 hours of dinner with Douglas Murray, then Jimmy Carr, then Stephen Bartlett, then that would just be my existence. Just hear, oh yeah, and that's cool, and oh yeah, what about that? And oh, I've never thought about this before. Like that would be the way I'd do it. But in lieu of living this perpetual dinner life, reading books is a good second for me.
Yeah, good second. I just think about the things that I couldn't even express in words with my vocabulary that I know about the art of marketing and human psychology and why people do what they do. And the deep experiences that are all fundamentally intertwined in the mistakes that I made in the journey of getting there. Now, in a book, I might give you like the 4 paragraphs, but the rest of the iceberg is the foundation of the thing that sits on top of it. And you think about podcasting, we both came into this industry, I'd say fairly late compared to like the rest of the industry, right?
Yeah, fair.
But because of that, there's a naivety to it, which allowed us to do new things because we didn't read the book.
Yep.
That I think some of the radio industry are struggling with that transition.
Dude, I mean, you're seeing it in America. The late night show hosts are trying to pivot from heavily scripted, heavily supported by writers and a production team and researchers and all this stuff. And then you put them down in the garage with a MV7 bus-powered microphone in front of them, and you realize, oh, like these people don't have any skills beyond being able to be very good at reading the script. And that's a massive skill. I couldn't do that. You put the script in front of me, I'm going to fall to the floor. But yeah.
What's the takeaway here, though? If someone's listening to this now and they're a young person and they're at the start of their career, or even if they're not necessarily a young person, takeaway is to go and fail at something that's high value in the future as soon as you can with the least amount of potential cost to yourself.
Yep.
It's like to go and practitioner. If I had kids now, I would tell them to go and join an AI startup that's well funded. That's what I'd tell them to do. Small group of people where they're going to be close to the information and the evidence, and I'd fail in a high value future industry. That's the thing I would do. If you want to be a master, but then, okay, they have to pick an industry that they are innately passionate about, because you won't go for a decade with Fred again or Jimmy Carr or Darren Brown's curiosity if you're not innately captured by that thing. But I think we are looking for cheat codes. I think much of the reason why people probably listen to our stuff is we want the 3 tips.
The most important question to ask is, what pain do you want in your life? What are you willing to struggle for? Anything worthwhile is going to require some degree of pain and struggle. So, if you're oriented toward the pain and the struggle, you're probably going to be more aligned with what you're capable of accomplishing rather than if you just orient toward the pleasures. So good. I was riddled with fake ambitions. My ambitions were fake. They weren't ambition, they were insecurity. Most of our lives are dragged by insecurity and shame. They're not driven by ambition. And it's a tragic truth that most of us are going to have. Our ambitions and our narratives fail us before we realize that they're illusions and mirages and they're false.
People want to take control over their success. They want to have that sort of power over it. But I remember sitting with Eddie Hearn, and I remember what Will Smith said, and they can all very clearly articulate the reason for their motivation and their drive. They live in a world where every media reporter will say, oh, you're so amazing. Like, tell me how you're motivated every day. It's not the case. Actually, I question how much choice they have motivation. In the case of Eddie Hearn, he lived in the footsteps of his father, Barry Hearn, who pulled up to school in these Rolls Royces, and he was known as Eddie Hearn's son. He's competing with his father. He'll say it. I'm dragged by the insecurity of being Barry Hearn's little son, and I outdo him. Yeah. It's the same with some of my other billionaire friends, and it's the same with Will Smith. He's being dragged by an insecurity and shame. So the key thing, because that's not always a bad thing, right? In every context of life, it might make you have financial freedom sooner than others, but you just want to make sure that you're cognizant of it at least. In my life, I realized at about 24 years old when we had an offer from a very big company to sell the business. And I went home that day and I Googled mansions and Lamborghinis on Auto Trader. And I looked into that screen and felt a deep sense of emptiness, like I'd been bitten by somebody, like someone had lied to me. And it was true. Someone had lied to me. 18-year-old, 12-year-old Steve had told me that fixed everything. And as I played out it arriving on my doorstep, I realized that I'd be poorer if I bought it. I'd lose something. I'd lose my company and the community and the love I had, but I'd lose something else. Then I went through this 6 months of sort of existential crisis of like, okay, so if it wasn't for that, if we weren't
What the fuck was
obsessing
I
like a
doing it
dog,
for?
what the fuck was I doing it for?
Yeah.
And my fear, this woman came into my office one day and she said to me, just imagine for a second you have everything you've ever wanted. She goes, because the truth is, you do. There's no goal that you haven't completed that you need to complete to be worth more. And I remember walking away and thinking, what a load of rubbish. 2 years of dwelling on that thought. And I arrived at this conclusion, I think because I was scared of this idea that losing my drive would lead to no ambition. But it's very much opposite. Losing your insecurities dissolve your ambition. It dissolves your fake ambition and creates room for your real ambitions that are internally intrinsically motivated. So instead of wanting a Lamborghini and a mansion, I wanted this whole set of other things when I realized that the Lamborghini and the mansion were never going to make Steve Bartlett worth more than one Steve Bartlett. Deeply in me, I genuinely think part of me thought that if I got a Lamborghini and a mansion, Steve Bartlett would be worth 2 or 4 Steve Bartletts. But your currency is one of one. And so at the moment, once I'd realized that nothing was going to change the intrinsic value of me, I could focus on things that I would do regardless of that perception of value fluctuation, like starting a podcast or learning to DJ or doing a musical up and down the country or joining a psychedelics business just to learn for a year about mental health and psychedelics. And the funny thing is, if we think about Fred again and Darren Brown and all of those people that achieved mastery from a decade of natural dedication, is that's also the path to real mastery when you're not being dragged.